Hi, I'm Christopher McClinton, and welcome to this episode of xtnsbl podcast. Really pleased today to have two guests from our partner PwC, Justin O'Connor and Musi Qureshi, both principals at PwC. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Chris. We're happy to be here.
Well, I always like to, before jumping into a conversation, just get you both to share a little bit of your background, perhaps on the way to your personal journey to where you are now at PwC, and then what your area of focus is today. Do you mind?
No, not at all. Me? So Justin O'Connor, partner at PwC, based in San Francisco, where we're getting to enjoy our production office here for the first time since we moved into this office. I've been with PwC for 13 years. Prior to that, I was in industry, worked at Merrill Lynch, started out my career there, then moved into the software business for a few years, and then I've been in consulting ever since. I lead our digital banking practice with Musi, and that usually means digital strategy for our fintech and banking clients, and also partnering with our alliance partners like Finxact. And so I lead our relationship with Finxact. Musi?
Thanks. Musi Qureshi, partner out of New York with PwC. And as Justin mentioned, I co-lead our digital banking practice. I came to PwC actually about 13 years ago as well, from a smaller boutique firm. And as Justin mentioned, everything from the strategy and the roadmap for many of our banking clients all the way through to the implementations, often these days, especially with alliance partners.
Well, thanks for that. I'm glad the audience gets to hear it. I'm not hearing it for the first time. Finxact and PwC have had the good fortune to be working together for a number of years. I'm excited to get to talk today about what we've accomplished during that period of time. Mm-hmm. And just to give our viewers a little bit of a preview as to what's coming, maybe broadly three areas. First of all, the current landscape. I think specifically, in banking and capital markets, I learned very quickly when I joined Finxact about 5 years ago that, especially because of what Finxact had developed, we were becoming very interesting to very large financial institutions. And what we learned was those institutions go to the likes of a PwC when they are thinking about digital transformation, when they're thinking about what to do next. So you are certainly hearing it firsthand from the executives that are having to think about some pretty challenging business opportunities. And I hope you can relay some of that, during our conversation today. Secondly, we're going to get to talk about specifically the PwC and the Finxact partnership and what that collaboration has produced. Really exciting stuff. It's been a highly productive collaboration. And then maybe finally at the end, if we have time, just go into a bit about the value that collaboration is delivering to clients. So with no further ado, maybe I could ask that first question, which is, as I said, you guys are hearing it directly from these executives. So if you want to just provide an overview of what are the challenges that they're facing, what are the struggles, and what are they doing about it?
Yeah, maybe I'll start off, and then Musi, you can please lead in. I think there's a lot of challenges in the banking space right now. I think there's not a lot of tailwinds, right? A lot of headwinds. So pressure on deposits, even though the outflows have slowed down. Cost of funds is very high. And for a while there, it felt like the big banks, probably the top five, they could use their deposit franchise as an advantage. And now the cost of funds is spread evenly. The amount of interest revenue, that net interest income that banks are able to generate now is kind of slowed down, right? So that's one headwind. Another headwind is loan and credit quality and demand, right, has slowed. And now I think some of the positives are that consumer spending has been fairly resilient, right? So a lot of interchange income is coming through for banks. But I think what banks are really struggling with is, customers, their demand and what they're asking banks to do. And we've been talking about this for a long time, is consistently increasing. And a lot of customers, based on our surveys, are open to new relationships. So, our latest survey was 1 in 3 customers is open to a new deposit relationship. And that doesn't necessarily have to do with a really high interest rate. It's more the experiences and the features along with a competitive interest rate is what's really kind of they're looking for. And so we're kind of seeing a lack of offerings that will really satisfy segment-specific needs for customers. And they're really open as long as somebody can address those needs. So I think overall, those headwinds are really preventing banks from performing well. They have large cost structures to deal with. So digital transformation winds up being a very viable option for them to simplify their architectures, launch new products, differentiate products into the market, because customers are demanding that right now.
And I think we see, coupled with higher expectations and a lot of asks on banks and institutions, the focus on efficiency and cost hasn't gone away. So it's doing more in a constrained environment and doing it quickly.
That's right.
Which is, I think, an area where, if I can just give a plug for the next gen platforms, but platforms like Finxact can really introduce an entire new sort of paradigm in terms of that efficiency. Rolling out products, TCO, the ability to innovate, partner, and we'll get into more of that, I think, in our conversation. So if those are the pressures that they're and the most pressing concerns that they're feeling right now, how would you say they're responding to them?
I think a lot of the investments in digital capabilities that had started already are continuing. So the capabilities needed to meet the expectations of the market are continuing, whether that's digital only channels, whether that's coordination between the branch and digital, all of that is continuing. Something Justin alluded to, I think we're seeing a lot of focus on, which is narrowing into what are segment specific asks and expectations. So not just we have a rate driven offer or we have an offer for millennials at large, but a more targeted, whether that's demographic, but also psychographics, understanding the segments and being very specifically tailored to their needs. I think banks are starting to do a lot of that. There's more room for that, but whether that's on the consumer side or on the business side. So understanding what a particular industry requires is really important in designing small business commercial offerings, in designing consumer offerings. So if I am a doctor or a dentist, my needs are very different than an HOA. And having very bespoke product offerings, very bespoke service offerings to meet those needs, I think we're starting to see a lot of that focus along with just the basic digital capabilities.
And I think they're launching, one of the differentiated product offerings, things that are unique to the market, bundled product offerings. Those are not easy for banks to deploy on old technology. So I think more and more the pattern that we're seeing is kind of a parallel offering off to the side on a next generation technology like Finxact integrated with other offerings so that banks can rapidly deploy something into the market and then figuring out interoperability back to the legacy bank. I think that's the prevailing kind of pattern that we're seeing is, build a sidecar offering so I can launch something into the market. Step one is usually a high interest, savings account or checking account, and then moving into things that are more meaningful, like, and especially for the regional banks, like small business and business banking.
I'd say, Justin, definitely it's been the most common approach that we've seen, specifically just in terms of how to get started. For like the regional, super regional banks launching that digital bank sort of under the mother brand, if you will, with, as you said, it's just, a product 2 or 3, but it's targeting, a very specific new segment with a value proposition. They get to start to have an experience, understand cloud native technologies better, understand API first platforms better. But that's certainly been the prevailing, I think, way to get started for most of our clients thus far. Let's talk for a moment about what we've been doing together, because it's been, quite frankly, transformative for Finxact. I alluded to it at the beginning of our conversation that we learned very quickly just the criticality, especially for a certain segment of very large financial institutions, the criticality of partnerships with the best global advisory firms on the planet. And we've tried hard to cultivate relationships with the likes of them. And we've had a very successful run at that with PwC. That's involved, and I'm not talking about over the last couple of months, but the last couple of years, lots of training of your engineers, trying to help PwC stand up a center of excellence that can just really, run with the ball, begin to innovate on its own on top of the Finxact platform. And you've done precisely that. And we're going to hear about that a little bit later. But maybe talk for a moment about when you're talking to these executives, how do you frame that up in terms of, here's how you make the leap from a traditional bank to a modern digital bank?
Yeah, I think this is a big topic, right? We could spend the whole hour right here.
I know.
I mean, I think it starts off with this. There's a lot of assumptions that were made, assumptions and just the way that banks have always worked. Given we used to have 10,000 banks in the U.S., now we're down to about 4,000. Where the trends are going, we're probably going to wind up with less banks. The regulators seem to be driving to a smaller bank footprint. Those pressures. There's some critical things that have. If you were going to build a bank right now, you're not going to build it in the product-centric way that old banks were built, right? You'd built a customer-centric offering. So I think that starts off with saying, would I build a business where I've got a deposit business next to a lending business next to a card business and have them all running separately? That's a really inefficient way to do it, and customers can feel that, right? So starting off there, number one. The other big assumption is that you need a banker in the middle of every interaction with a customer, right? And I think as we talk about digital, that really what it means in this industry is to say, how can I use data to figure out where Chris is in his life, what he needs, and digitally give him what he needs, and not assume I've got a banker that's going to have to identify you, figure out like kind of where you're at, and then offer you something off the shelf. And so I think when it comes to like how we partner and why we want to be in the bank transformation business, that it's a business transformation. I think there's this, banks need to become much more efficient, as Musi said. They need to offer different things for their customers. So when you're doing these projects, it's more than just a technology transformation, right? You need to change the way you operate. You need to change the way you sell. Almost the entire business needs to be re-architected. And I think that's what we're hearing from our clients. Like, I need to launch better products for my clients. I need to get better data about what's going on with them. I need to deal with all the regulations that are in an efficient way. It has to be for a completely different efficiency ratio in the future than it is right now. So the reason why I think our partnership is critical, it's partly because of the center of excellence and us building on the Finxact platform and having reps in the market and really good quals that our clients can say, yes, Finxact and PwC did this for me, and that's great. But it's also because we're in the business of helping our banking clients, really kind of change for the future. And most of the time when they're doing that, it starts with technologies at the core of their business, like Finxact.
Yeah, and I think all the things that you touched on, whether it's the regulatory implications, the customer experience implications, we've been doing that work from a consulting perspective as an advisor to banks for years. And now it's the complement of what's the technology that's going to enable that and allow it to scale. So It's not just thinking about it as a consulting service, but it's that plus more.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned one area of expertise that just we've seen it that quickly shores up confidence with the FIs coming from PwC on the regulatory domain, but also and Finxact has been able to really do this as well, and it's been a competitive advantage for us. Just the banking knowledge, like we do have a bunch of smart technologists, but we also have a lot of folks who've been in banking and working on banking technology for their entire careers. And so it's been fun to see PwC and Finxact go into a client and be able to just demonstrate that whether you're talking about lending, C&I, CRE, mortgage, BNPL, or something on the deposit side. I think it makes them a little nervous if you're coming in there and you're just purely a technologist and you're not also sort of demonstrating just like what should be the behavior of a product like this in market, such that it's meeting the customer demand, but also it's regulatory compliant. It's reporting out properly, whether that's to agencies, the GL, whatever the case may be. But that's been, I think, a strong suit and a real area of just overlap for us. That's working to our advantage.
Yeah, I think if you don't understand what you're transforming, it's really hard to do so. Yeah. So understanding what the legacy processes, et cetera, are, so that you know what can be moved, right? If you've never stood behind a teller line, if you've never been in the vault, it's hard to appreciate the history that banking was grown on. Now, understanding that there are things that don't have to be done the same way anymore. It's 2023, and we can certainly change some of those assumptions that Justin was talking about. But I think it helps to understand the landscape of the operations, the regulations, et cetera. And then let's figure out how to do it better.
Without a doubt, it makes me think a couple of episodes back, I was talking to our CTO, Jim Joyce, and there are lots of examples like this at Finxact, but he was like, I started, working as a teller so that I could understand banking, and I progressed up through that so that I could be, a technologist that understands banking. So it's absolutely, the domain knowledge is key.
Well, it's also that, as you move from product-centric models to customer-centric models, you have to rethink how these products are built, right? So a lot of people will kind of discount, like, these are all the same 5 products that we've had in banking for a really long time. But when you think about how you underwrite a loan, typically underwrite a loan based on one product, right? A single point in time when somebody's saying, is Chris a qualified, a person for this specific loan? More, our clients are asking us to rethink that model and say, I don't want to look at Chris just for this specific loan. I want to look at Chris. I want to look at the relationship, right? Mm-hmm. If you really have always just thought of these things and you don't have that domain expertise, you're going to miss a lot of opportunities to kind of help your clients commonly really do some really cool things in the market.
Yeah, in fact, you guys have helped us to just connect with some companies that are helping with that 360 view of the customer, because, stay with the example of Chris, I'm not, a moment in time that doesn't change. So I'm evolving, whether that's my income, whether that's my borrowing needs, whatever the case may be, and just to be aware of that, to be able to, extend the right offer at the right price at the right time. Those technologies are really important, maybe especially for the really large financial institutions that have, millions and millions of customers. That's not an easy task to do without technology. So these are some of the things that you're bringing to bear, in your industry cloud solution, and we're looking forward to hearing about it. Speaking of which, tell me about that, if you will. I mean, I know about it, but tell our listeners about it, because it's really exciting. I've had the chance to watch it just kind of blossom and mature over the last couple of years. Saw a demo at Monday 2020 that just knocked my socks off, and I think everybody in the room, with just what you've been able to do there. But maybe take a minute and tell us what it is, but also, if you don't mind, Finxact has played an important role in helping you guys, incubate and innovate that. So describe what that's been.
Yeah, I mean, so we realized, a common client of ours once said to me, he said, there's a lot of really great innovation that's happening in the banking space. And I think, a lot of those offerings are helping to bring better experiences and outcomes for the clients. But the scale has been removed from, the client's ability to deploy these things, right? So where you get the benefits of greater interactions and greater horsepower in terms of transactional systems like Finxact, or greater interactions with online banking mobile platforms or payment platforms or card platforms, they're not integrated. And so I think what the role that we're trying to play in the market is to bring scale back, right? And so our industry cloud offering, what we were seeing was, a lot of industry specific cloud products coming from the hyperscalers. And so being that we have a cross industry platform, especially within transformation where Musi and I sit, we wanted to give all of our industries a chassis to build on top of the cloud, and then partner with our alliance partners to build industry specific offerings. Banking for us happened to be first. And so what we did was we took the alliance partners that we've been working with, and we started with customer journeys, consumer, small business, and getting into business banking. We started designing end-to-end journeys so that we could onboard customers, so we could, basically start stitching together and putting those things together as accelerators for our clients. We wound up feeling like there was a gap in the market, and so one of the pieces we built that is ours. For the most part, we leverage our alliance partners' technologies and we integrate them, and they're aligned to our overall business and technical architecture. For example, we talked about having a client-centric model, more that you have one onboarding process across the entire architecture, not siloed onboarding processes, right? So that's the philosophy. What the gap we found was that there wasn't any good integration layers that we felt that we could go to market with. We do have some partnerships that we're working, but we wound up building a tool called Cloud Intelligence. We designed it with a client, wound up building it, and it's effectively a service handler, event-based integration layer that allows you to choreograph your offerings rather than orchestrate them. So every single endpoint, like Finxact, would have a service handler. And then once I have that endpoint, I've basically taught the application, how to interact and get a payload from Finxact. And once I do that, I can put Finxact in anywhere into any journey anytime I want. And so the power of that has been to say, especially going back to the original example of with banks launching a lot of sidecar offerings and against their legacy architectures, interoperability and coexistence is the biggest problem to solve for, right? Because then you've got these, just an uncountable amount of like kind of constraints to customers, to operations, to bankers around, okay, now I've got an existing customer that's very valuable to the bank. I'm offering a really new cool thing. They apply for it. Can they see their old stuff? How do I make that all work? And that's just like the customer impact, let alone like, integration to the GL and where do the wires go and kind of all the other things. So we use that tool to basically solve the interoperability and the coexistence problem. And it's helped us to move to a model where less PowerPoints and more showing, right? We get calls all the time where we basically say, hey, I can't do this on my current application. And so we can go and configure that solution. Finxact is integrated into that environment. We can configure that in a day and then go the next day, go show the client how they could do that on a tool like Finxact in a modern architecture. And less PowerPoints, more kind of functioning code, I think is better, like that's better, right?
Well, and I think with Industry Cloud, you said the right word, which is functioning code. It's not just a demo environment. It's all real code. It's live. It's in our PwC accelerator. It's in our sandbox, but it could be deployed anywhere. And so we have essentially coupled all of the sort of best alliance partners that we have to demonstrate that. And sometimes we'll go to client meetings to showcase a journey, whether it's a seamless onboarding or a payment flow. And we can do so, with a pretty quick turn using our Industry Cloud Accelerator. And that's been a game changer.
I think the other thing before I lose the thread is that, you guys have this too, right? You can deploy Finxact natively into a public cloud, or you can put it in your own cloud and host it. We have a license to use Finxact. It's basically in your cloud environment. With Industry Cloud, we're basically running, when you see it demoed, every single piece of it is running in a different cloud. So the other problem we're trying to solve for is multiple platforms integrated for an outcome of providing a customer an experience, running in their own clouds and providing full observability across those areas and just being able to identify latency issues. So you need to monitor those different platforms across all those different cloud environments. You need to have full observability and be able to identify resiliency problems. And that was the other thing that we were solving for. So it comes with a dashboard so you can see that. And when we're demoing this thing, we can see where the latency issues are coming from, just because we've exposed that.
Yeah, it's a tremendous accelerator, and it does get you out of sort of the boardroom looking at slideware and actually having an experience. And I'm gonna shamelessly tease this out of you. I believe that was first developed on Finxact because you guys felt that it had reached a stage of maturity that was inspiring some confidence for your team. An event-driven system, rigorously documented, and even with some features that might be for the future, such as extensibility. But
yes, yep. Finxact was the first core that we integrated.
And then I think just one other thought. Your comments triggered in my head. You're right. The integration issues are so vital for the bankers to understand, for it to be manageable on an ongoing basis. And Cloud Intelligence, I think, is solving for that very, very neatly. I mean, Frank Sanchez and Jim and Deb and that team, they were very clear about this from the beginning. I've jokingly said before, Frank created the flux capacitor, not the DeLorean. So we didn't have the chassis, and we came clean about that early on. And the expectation was that Finxact is an open platform, especially for that very large financial institution segment who has their own ideas about the solutions that they want to surround us with. So Cloud Intelligence, I think, is something that really helps them dive right into that experience and start to understand it better. So we're really happy to see it have just progressed to the point that it has. Maybe if you'll talk for just a minute about specifically, so what are some of the solutions that, that collaboration has in terms of product that's made possible?
So one of the things I was going to say that we built early on, and Justin mentioned this, right? We think about what's the customer experience we're trying to deliver, design the journey, and then that lends itself to what are the products in the market that don't exist that we would love to see. And so thinking about bundled products, thinking about pricing that can be dynamic. That was one of the first things we built in Industry Cloud with Finxact, right? Is having the ability to try out something that would be very difficult to build or would require manual steps in the current environment. Now, using Industry Cloud and Finxact and all of the things that we've just talked about, we were able to build and launch something that's very different than exists, I think, anywhere in the market today. I would say that's probably been one of the most interesting and continues to be one of the most successful offerings that we demo usually to banks.
Yep. Bundled product offerings, some of those come natively out of Finxact, right? The spend, save, and borrow. I think another one is just like things as simple as high yield savings, right? Which is a lot of banks' first step, a high yield savings that's based on overall value of the relationship to the bank, right? So a dynamic interest rate hike based on additional funds that get contributed or just overall relationship growth. I mean, to me, that's not in the market very anywhere. Something easy to do in an architecture like that we've built with Finxact and our Industry Cloud offering, and we demo that. And but you have to be able to look at multiple balances across the. You either look at your own balance in order to dynamically raise the interest rate, or look for external data points to show that. So you can reflect an increased interest rate based on overall value of the relationship to the bank that has increased.
I think this is where the partnership really comes to life because the technology exists. And now we're just thinking about new and different ways to create product offerings that can really take advantage of this. And that's where when we showcase or demo, people are excited because it's not a technology problem. It's not a business problem. It's the combination of the two that we're really solving for. So that's what makes this really exciting.
And I know that you've also put some effort into helping banks de-risk a conversion. So yes, it is the case. We've talked about some of the more pragmatic ways to get started in terms of that modernization journey. I think we mentioned one of the more popular ones, perhaps, is like a digital brand, that's running alongside the bank's existing infrastructure. You hear different terms, but sort of this progressive transformation where over time, more and more products are launched on the next gen core. But there is a point in time, some event horizon where, the bank is going to want to get themselves to, a next gen core and not, have quite so many silos in the bank, creating silo departments and processes and so forth. So maybe just talk for a minute about what are the strategies or the tools that you're talking to those executives about to de-risk, an eventual conversion?
I mean, I think it starts off with solving the interoperability and coexistence problem, right? That to me, that's like the first step and I think that we've heard that loud and clear in the market, that the existing core and existing infrastructure support all of their revenue and profitability, everything the bank is right now, right? Moving off of that is a highly risky thing, right? So the idea that launching a product or set of products on a new technology stack, solving the interoperability problem kind of just takes the energy and the risk out of it for a period of time, right? Mm-hmm. Where you just say, now I've got the new thing that I can launch, I can bring markets fast. I've now don't have huge issues with interoperability and coexistence with my old architecture. Then you start talking about what are the different ways, there's all different types of products and conversion opportunities, right, that can happen. So I think, a lot of things are just incentivizing people to, I think the great thing about shiny new product offerings is everybody wants them, right? So we've seen things as innovative as kind of push button convert if you want to enroll and allow people as you've gotten parity in your new architecture, cash incentives or just making those, building the conversion utilities that start with a person opting in to a move to a new offering where they'll press the button, sign all the T's and C's, and you kind of they move over at their own time, right? Mm-hmm. Other things are, not letting loans expire on old platforms and then kind of, putting them together in the new platform. I think there's a lot of different tactics, but I think less and less we're kind of seeing the forced conversion into the new core unless you have a large event like a merger or an acquisition, and more that, build parity between the two platforms and then allow people to, lean in and kind of self-select into these new offerings. And then you have a totally different kind of client experience.
And I think as long as you do that with, the thoughtfulness, the planning, and all of the things that come with that, that's the de-risking, is being thoughtful and not, sort of assuming you have to do this big bang conversion. Okay, if the alternative is this kind of opt-in and slow migration, what's the game plan for that? And that's sort of where I would say a lot of the heavy lift is, but it's important work.
And I think, some of the investments we're making is, we're investing in this partnership, right? So we're building conversion utilities that can be used specifically for engagements like this. And all of that is meant to de-risk, kind of those events. So there's going to be a certain amount of the population that is always going to need to be converted. And then that's when you kind of need like industrial grade conversion utilities in practice and processes.
With the remainder of our time, I'd love to just hear from you both about the value to the clients that our collaboration, that our partnership is bringing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll lead off. We've heard from the market and from our clients and from you, right, and from our leadership, right. This relationship is strategic for us, and so we're investing in it, and that means that we're building teams that only do Finxact, right. They're trained up, they're badged, they're wearing the Finxact jersey on projects. And then we're building accelerators around Finxact. To me, what the outcome is you've got, it's just a kind of a faster time to market, lower risk implementations. And I think the thing here is that, I think we always talk about this internally, I think, between our two firms, right? That these are business transformations, not technology projects. And so in order to help banks kind of defeat those headwinds that we talked about, it means you have to change your business model to some extent, right? It's not just, hooking up a system and then all of a sudden all the problems are solved. And so I think that's where this partnership really gets interesting, where we're bringing the strategy, we're bringing the business transformation muscle and know-how, the regulatory people that can help make sure that everything is regulatory compliant, the change management, the agile, all the pieces that are needed to kind of successfully transform around a really kind of progressive technology like Finxact.
I think you hit that exactly, Justin, which is the technology that Finxact brings to market. We're happy to, and we're well on the way of surrounding it with all of the things that PwC natively brings. And so as a banking client, I think that's the de-risking of it, right? Is that we have the best combination of partners. As a bank, I think that's the value, is that they get everything they need from this alliance that we have amongst ourselves, because we're thinking through all the things that our banking clients need, the advisory support, the regulatory support, the badged engineers who can be fingers on keyboard, and then underpinning it all, the Finxact platform.
I loved the way you phrased that. By the way, Justin, it's not a technology project. It's a business transformation exercise. And that's maybe just beginning right from the start to have everybody in the room thinking about it that way is very instructive.
100%. Absolutely.
Well, I really appreciate you both joining us today. And it's just been a thriving partnership. So it's exciting for us just to continue to watch it grow. Some really exciting things ahead of us. Looking very forward to 2024. And just thanks for being here.
No, thank you. And maybe next time you can join us in our fancy studio in San Francisco.
My studio is not as fancy, so I was looking up.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
You bet.